Hey everyone, welcome back to PoliMetrics. I'm Dallin and I'm here with my co-host today, Morgan.
Hey there. And if you're new here, we're the show that digs into economic data so that you don't have to.
And today we're talking about something that made a lot of economists very nervous, the August jobs report. Morgan, when you first saw these numbers, what was your reaction?
Honestly, I had to double check the data because I thought I was reading it wrong. 22,000 jobs added in a month for the entire United States economy.
Yeah, for context, a normal month usually sees something between 100 to 200,000 jobs added, depending on the month that we're in. So 22,000, that's basically the economy hitting the brakes.
Today's episode is brought to you by Alt30 Data Consulting. Every business generates data, but not every business knows how to use it effectively. Alt30 bridges that gap with expert analysis and consulting services that turn your data into real business results. Learn more at alt30.com.
All right, so let's break down what actually happened in August. The headline number was 22,000 net jobs. The unemployment rate stayed at about 4.3%, which sounds pretty steady until you realize that's because people aren't even looking for work anymore.
And that's such an important point that gets lost in the headlines. When unemployment doesn't rise despite terrible job creation, it usually means people are just giving up on job searching entirely.
Yeah, exactly. The labor force participation rate held at 62.3%, but the number of people in the labor force who actually want a job, that ticked up over the past year. So we've got people who want to work, but have basically thrown in the towel.
It's like musical chairs where they keep taking away chairs, but instead of people like fighting for the remaining ones, they're just walking away from the game entirely.
When you look at total employment, we're at 159.5 million people working in a country of 330 million. That kind of puts things into perspective there.
There are some really interesting things that we can see if we look at wages. Wages are still growing, which is the one thing keeping this from being a complete disaster story. Average hourly earnings went up to $36.53, which is a 3.7% increase year over year.
Which is still ahead of inflation, right?
Right. But here's what's notable.
Production and non-supervisory workers are doing slightly better with a 3.9% increase. Their average is now $31.46 an hour.
So the people who need wage growth the most are actually getting it. That's surprisingly good news.
Well, yes and no. The average work week stayed right around 34 hours, which suggests employers are holding on to workers rather than cutting hours. But if hiring slows down much more, those wage gains could disappear pretty quickly.
So I guess it just kind of seems like employers are saying, we'll pay our current people more, but we're not going to bother with hiring anyone new right now, which is good if you do have a job, but terrible if you're looking for a new one.
Exactly. And that brings us to what's happening in different parts of the economy.
Okay, so we've been talking about 22,000 jobs total, but when you break it down by sector, it's like we're looking at two completely different economies.
It's wild. Healthcare added 31,000 jobs by itself. Social assistance added another 16,000. Leisure and hospitality put up 28,000.
So if healthcare, social services, and restaurants are doing all this hiring, how did we end up with only 22,000 jobs total?
Because goods producing industries lost 25,000 jobs. Manufacturing dropped 12,000. Construction lost 7,000. And even mining and oil and gas shed 6,000 jobs.
So it's kind of like we're becoming a service economy, whether we want to or not. The stuff making part of America looks like it's shrinking, while the people helping part might actually be growing.
And here's something that really surprised me. Federal government employment dropped by 15,000 jobs. That's not layoffs from some budget crisis. That's the current administration actively shrinking the federal workforce.
which, depending on your politics, you might think is good or bad, but economically, it's just another drag on job growth when we can't really afford it.
Right. And wholesale trade, basically people who move goods around the economy, they lost another 11,700 jobs. When wholesalers are cutting workers, that usually means businesses aren't expecting to sell as much stuff.
So it looks like we've got a service economy that's still hiring, but a goods economy that's basically in recession. That's not really sustainable long term.
When you look at who's getting hurt the most, the patterns are pretty predictable, but still depressing.
Yeah, let me guess. It's not really affecting everyone equally.
Not even close. Black unemployment jumped to 7.5%, which is more than double the white unemployment rate of 3.7%. Hispanic unemployment hit 5.3%, while Asian unemployment actually fell to 3.6.
So just to be clear too, that is a pretty typical pattern that we see in the data, just generally even during good times, with disparities in unemployment rates between different demographic groups.
Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. And if you didn't graduate high school, your unemployment rate is 6.7%, which is a jump from 5.5% from just a month before. But if you have a bachelor's degree, you're sitting pretty well at a 2.7% unemployment rate.
So we kind of have a couple of sub economies going on at the same time. If you're educated and white or Asian, the economy might look pretty good to you. And if you're not a part of those groups, then maybe not so much.
You're facing unemployment rates that are basically double or triple what everyone else is dealing with. And teen unemployment rate is sitting at 13.9%.
That is a lot of teenagers you can't find a job that want to work.
Right. And young adults aged 20 to 24 are at 9.2% unemployment. These are people trying to start their careers and they're hitting a wall.
That's probably going to have pretty big long-term effects, don't you think? People who can't get that first job experience, they can't get into the labor market when they want to.
Absolutely. There's research showing that graduating into a recession can affect your earnings for decades, shaping people's entire career trajectories.
All right, so we talked about the official unemployment rate staying at about 4.3%, but there's a whole other story hiding underneath that number, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, this is concerning. So, 4.7 million people are working part time jobs, but they actually want full time work. They're what we call involuntary part time workers.
And that number is up from the month before and about 500,000 higher than last year. So we've got nearly 5 million people who are technically employed, but really underemployed.
Like saying, good news, everyone has food, but not mentioning that half the people only get crackers while they're asking for full meals.
And there's long-term unemployment. How bad is that looking?
So nearly 2 million people have been unemployed for 27 weeks or longer. That's more than half a year without a job. And it represents about a quarter of all unemployed people.
Wow, a quarter. So one out of every four unemployed people has been out of work for more than 6 months.
Right. And here's why that matters. The longer you are unemployed, the harder it becomes to find work. Employers start to see gaps in your resume as red flags, and your skills might get rusty or your network or connections that you have weaken.
Yeah, it becomes a vicious cycle at that point. You can't get a job because you haven't had a job.
So if people focus on that 4.3% unemployment rate and think, well, that's not too bad. I think they're missing the fact that we have millions of people either underemployed or stuck in long-term joblessness.
Yeah, that's not the best sign that you want to see in the economy, is it?
So stepping back, what story is the data telling us?
So I think we're looking at an economy that's running out of steam. You've got services still chugging along, healthcare, restaurants, entertainment, but the foundation of goods production is starting to crack.
And the thing that worries me is how this lines up with what we talked about in our last episode about unemployment insurance. Remember how most states can't even handle 1 year of elevated unemployment?
Yeah, if these job numbers are a preview of what's coming, we could be looking at a system that's completely unprepared. States like California and Pennsylvania are already borrowing a lot of money, and we're not even in a recession yet.
Plus, the demographics tell us that when things do get worse, it's going to hit the most vulnerable communities first.
People without college degrees, people in minority groups, and even young people trying to start their careers.
And something that really bothers me right now, the federal government is actually cutting jobs right now when the private sector is already slowing down. That combination is just not going to do much good for the economy.
It's basic macroeconomics, right? When private spending slows, public spending should pick up the slack, not add to the problem.
Exactly. So, what should people be watching for in the next few months?
I'd keep an eye on those sectoral trends. If healthcare and leisure start cutting jobs too, that's when you know we're really in trouble. Those have been the bright spots in our economy.
And I think watch the demographics. If we see Black and Hispanic unemployment start climbing above 8 or 9%, historically that's been a leading indicator of broader problems.
And don't forget about those underemployment numbers either. When involuntary part time work starts spiking, that often happens before the official unemployment rate catches up.
It's like economic canaries in the coal mine. They start showing distress before the bigger problems become obvious.
So here's what I think people need to understand. This isn't just one bad month.
Right, we've been seeing job growth slow for a couple of months now. Manufacturing has been losing jobs for 3 straight months. The federal workforce has shrunk by about 84,000 positions since January.
And remember, economists are already putting recession odds at 35% over the next year. These job numbers aren't helping those odds.
The thing that keeps me up at night is thinking about all those people who are going to need unemployment benefits if this turns into something bigger, knowing that most states simply aren't prepared.
It's like watching a slow motion car crash. You can see it's coming, you know it's going to be bad, but the people who could do something about it are arguing about whose fault it is rather than just hitting the brakes.
Which brings us back to our core message, evidence over ideology. The data is telling us pretty clearly that we've got problems brewing. The question is whether policymakers are going to pay attention to the numbers or keep fighting about talking points.
And for our listeners, the practical takeaway is if you've been thinking about building up some emergency savings or maybe updating your resume, now might not be a bad time.
Not to be alarmist, but the smart money is on being prepared rather than being surprised. All right, and that's all for this episode of PoliMetrics. Thanks for diving into the weeds with us on the August jobs report numbers. If you want to see the actual numbers and charts we talked about, we have the links in our description below. If you've got questions or topics you want us to tackle, drop us a comment. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you next time.